Imagine for a moment that Yellowstone National Park erupts. Millions of people would die in an instant. Large parts of the United States would become uninhabitable. The country, and perhaps even the entire world economy, would collapse. A Yellowstone eruption would be one of the worst natural disasters in history. So it's good then that scientists can tell us whether or not we need to worry about it, right? Well, yes and no. Yellowstone has erupted several times in the past, and there are signs that something similar is coming. But how soon will this happen? That's less clear-cut. There's a lot we don't know about what goes on under the ground, including just how close we might be to the next eruption. But in 2022, researchers published a new study that revealed some pretty disturbing news. They said that recent earthquakes around Yellowstone may be a sign that the next eruption is closer than ever before. So how worried should we really be? Yellowstone National Park covers an area of more than 2,200 square miles. It contains everything from forests, lakes and rivers to canyons and geysers. What makes Yellowstone special, however, is what's going on under the surface, because it's here where you'll find the Yellowstone Supervolcano. This is one of the largest and most powerful volcanoes on Earth. And while it hasn't been active for thousands of years, there are signs that it could erupt again at any moment. The supervolcano itself is roughly 43 by 28 miles, but it sits within a much larger magma chamber. This is like a giant underground reservoir filled with molten rock and magma. It fuels the supervolcano and provides the energy needed for eruptions. In total, this magma chamber stretches for around 60 miles in each direction. But how big is this in terms of area? Well, if it were a perfect circle, it would cover almost 1,900 square miles. To put that into context, that's bigger than the entire area of Yellowstone National Park. Because of this massive magma chamber, Yellowstone isn't just a single volcano, but rather a whole volcanic system made up of several smaller ones. The three largest are the Sour Creek Cone, the Dragon's Tooth, and Mount Holmes. Each of these are located within the Yellowstone caldera. This is a large crater formed during the supervolcano's most recent eruption around 630,000 years ago. When this occurred, an estimated 2,400 cubic miles of material was ejected. This included pumice, ash, and other volcanic debris. Today, the caldera is 45 by 28 miles across, and at its lowest point, it's 3,000 feet below the surrounding land. Over time, the land has mostly recovered, but there are still some reminders of the scale of the disaster. These include the Norris Geyser Basin and the aptly named Yellowstone Lake. But even though the last major eruption happened hundreds of thousands of years ago, there have been plenty of smaller eruptions since then. Small eruptions are actually quite common and usually take the form of geysers and hot springs. You might recognize Old Faithful from your own visits to the park. Well, it's one of more than 10,000 geysers, making Yellowstone one of the most geothermally active places on Earth. All of this activity is driven by the magma chamber beneath the surface, which scientists are still trying to understand today. For example, they haven't actually been able to image the magma chamber itself. Scientists can analyze data gathered from seismic readings and gravity measurements to get an idea of what's going on down there. But no one has ever been able to see the magma chamber directly. It's possible that future drilling projects could make this possible, but for now, it remains one of the great mysteries of the Yellowstone Supervolcano. But just how big would the next eruption be? Well, no one knows for sure. Most scientists agree that another super eruption isn't likely anytime soon, but others argue that it could happen at any moment. There are three things that would increase the likelihood of a large eruption. The first is an earthquake. Yellowstone sits on top of a hotspot created by the movement of two of the major tectonic plates that make up the Earth's crust. The Pacific Plate is sliding underneath the North American Plate, and this creates frequent earthquakes in the area. In 1985, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck just 50 miles from the park. It didn't trigger a volcanic eruption, but it did release a lot of energy. Some experts believe that a much stronger earthquake could destabilize the magma chamber and trigger a super eruption. The second thing that could trigger a large eruption is water. As you probably know, water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But if you add pressure, it can remain liquid at much higher temperatures. This is why some of the geysers and hot springs in Yellowstone reach temperatures of more than 200 degrees. If the magma chamber were to come into contact with the vast amounts of groundwater found in the park, it could cause steam to build up and increase the pressure. Eventually, this could lead to an explosion so large that it would blow the top off of the volcano and cause a massive eruption. Finally, the third thing that could trigger a large eruption is magma. The magma chamber under Yellowstone contains enough magma to fill up 14 Olympic-sized swimming pools, but this amount fluctuates all the time. Sometimes magma rises from deep inside the earth and is added to the chamber. Other times magma is removed through vents or smaller eruptions. No one knows exactly how quickly magma is being added to the chamber, but a sudden influx could increase the pressure and lead to an eruption. So what do we actually know about the chances of a super eruption happening? Well, thanks to advanced monitoring equipment installed by the United States Geological Survey, scientists can measure small changes in the shape of the volcano. By analyzing GPS readings, they can tell when the land rises or falls by fractions of an inch. They can also detect even the tiniest earthquakes that occur around the volcano. All of this data is carefully monitored for signs that the volcano could be waking up. In 2018, there was a swarm of earthquakes in the area. These were small but numerous and raised concerns about the stability of the volcano. However, careful analysis showed that the earthquakes were too far away from the magma chamber to cause any problems. Nevertheless, the event was a reminder of just how unpredictable Yellowstone can be. In the past, some scientists have suggested that the chance of a super eruption is 1 in 750,000. Others say it could happen at any time. And in 2020, a different study claimed that the chance of an eruption is 1 in 27,000. The problem is that no one knows how accurate these figures are because it's impossible to know exactly what's going on under the surface. In 2022, a new paper threw a spanner in the works. This study used a computer model to try and determine when the next eruption might happen. It took into account all of the recorded history of the volcano, including its size, shape, and frequency of past eruptions. The results shocked scientists. According to their calculations, the probability of a super eruption in any given year is between 1 in 39 and 1 in 14,000. While this seems reassuring, it means that we could be due an eruption at any moment. It's worth remembering that Yellowstone has only had 3 major eruptions over the past 2 million years. The intervals between them were 500,000 years, 400,000 years, and 600,000 years. The last one happened around 640,000 years ago, which means that our current gap is already longer than the average. So, are we about to see an eruption? Well, according to the USGS, the short answer is no. They closely monitor Yellowstone and haven't noticed anything that suggests an eruption is imminent. But they do acknowledge that there is a small possibility that something could happen in the future. Of course, this is true of every volcano. And Yellowstone is just one of many potentially active volcanoes around the world. Perhaps the best way to sum up the situation is that we just don't know what's going on under the surface. The truth is that there are so many variables at play that it's difficult to predict what could happen. There's also so much we don't know about volcanoes themselves. Even the experts can't agree on how long we have left until the next eruption. But there's no doubt that when it does happen, it'll be one of the worst natural disasters in history.